right? Cities are either shrinking in terms of population and vitality and businesses, which Chicago is currently, or they are growing, and there's more jobs, more opportunities, and more affordability. The thesis of my campaign is about affordability through growth.
I Am Consciously Curious, a podcast for those that are searching for meaning and fulfillment in their lives. My name is Victor Chan, and I'm on a mission to find out why people do what they do. I've interviewed white-collar to blue-collar, entrepreneurs to passion projects, and life is just too short to not produce meaningful work. Thanks for tuning in. All right, we are live, everyone. We have Joe Holberg in the studio. What an honor.
Well, thanks for having me.
The last time we chatted, you were on your way back from the Michigan game.
Yes, in Indianapolis.
And as I'm not a sports guy per se, but as busy as you are, I appreciate the effort and the time you put in to enjoy the little things in life.
It was one of those things that just sort of it popped up at the very end, and we said, well, Michigan hasn't been in the national championship since 1989.
Wow.
And we're like, not going to miss it. So ran down there, made it to the game, got up early the next morning, did calls all the way on the way home, as a good mayoral candidate would do. And it was a good time.
Okay. So yes, that's exactly why you're here, is to share a lot about yourself, the personal backstory as to what makes you credible, qualified, and even just interested in taking on this Goliath of a position. Where I want to see where you would like to start. To lay some groundwork on the day-to-day of what it takes to build this platform. The last newsletter I saw from you is like you raised over $800,000 in campaign funds. But what does the average day-to-day look like for you and your team? Yeah, for sure. And let's circle back on maybe some of the bio and all that stuff later. But the campaign itself, I think there's something really important to acknowledge, which is there's a beauty and an accessibility in democracy that is currently feels like it's under attack on a lot of levels, but as it relates to sort of pursuing, this position, anyone can engage in the democratic process. And I think that's really important. And that is what has allowed us to really build this campaign from the ground up as a political outsider, but also find widespread support. And so the $800,000 that we've raised, that has come from over 400 people. And so in 6 months, being the first candidate declared in the city October 1st of 2025, we were getting started very early, but in part because we knew we had to climb an uphill mountain in a battle to take on sort of the entrenched political class and the established candidates that have been inside of or around government for 20, 30 years, essentially the large portion or the entire portion of their careers. And there's a lot of respect that's due to individuals that spend their life in public service. But I think right now what people we're finding are saying is they want somebody with a different background and a different perspective. We can't continue to elect the political class and expect different results. And so it's a daily grind, but I'm very good at that, having built a business, having built a nonprofit, and having built even a classroom on the west side of Chicago. Right.
So
it's so interesting, like how I'm sure you would think that most of these politicians, career politicians, came in with a pure intention. And I wonder what happens in the process of that career where maybe you shake enough hands and you owe certain things to certain people to where your hands are tied by the time your constituents want you to make certain decisions or I guess execute the promises that you made. Yeah, and there's a real tension there, especially in American politics, right? And I don't think many people disagree at this point. There's too much money in politics, right? And this is not a political party issue. This is not a federal, state, or local issue. This is just a massive issue that affects our entire political system. And I think the longer you are in politics, the more you do get exposed to the necessity of raising money and sort of making sure that your career and your political campaigns are funded. And, strategically, everyone has to do that. But at the same time, we have to recognize that after a while, I think those pure intentions, a lot of people end up in a position where it is about chasing that next dollar to increase the likelihood of electability. And then there's sort of like a long-term comfort where it's like, okay, this is stable. I'm sort of, able to remain in my position or slowly advance, the ladder in the political sense. And then you just get the unfortunate sclerosis where a lot of people are then, like you said, their hands are tied. There's actually some game theory, and there's some good books written on this about the most strategic position for a lot of politicians is actually just the course of inaction, right? And there's a book that I've been reading, and I'm almost done with it. It's called The Industry of Politics, and it's not a commentary about Democrats or Republicans. It's just like the system is actually designed to induce certain behaviors, and those behaviors are not necessarily about advancing legislation that the mass people, 80% of people plus in the United States want. And so you can't really blame any individual politician per se because they operate within the certain context of the political machinery. But at the same time, I think that's where the extra value of having a political outsider as a potential candidate for mayor really comes in. You're sitting there and you're like, whoa, now I have a choice that is something different than what I thought I was going to be offered as a voter in Chicago.
Yeah. And from what I've seen on the social media pages is like there's no smear campaign. It's more so identifying the problems that Chicago is currently facing and presenting solutions to these problems.
Yeah, for me in particular.
From you in particular.
Yeah, I'm not interested in the sort of the political jockeying among these candidates. I think we're at a moment where the vision of what's next for Chicago, as well as the plan to work on getting there, is ultimately, that's me. I'm a builder. I'm a problem solver.
Yeah.
I'm in this realm of politics, but I'm not from the political establishment or class. And I'm much more concerned about representing the progress and the solutions and the outcomes that I'm hearing people tell me they care about than I am about, picking on or fighting with all these other candidates.
These are people that you're probably going to have to work with eventually.
Yeah. and quite honestly, I mean, like you look at the knowledge and the experience and the skills, and we're talking about people that have worked in government, not just elected individuals. There's so much talent and knowledge and expertise in Chicago, and if you burn all those bridges along the way, they're not going to want to work with you, and then you enter the same paradigm and trap that the current mayor is in, which is he burned all of the bridges, and so his island of talent, his ability to hire people instead of hiring his best friends, which he has done, he's not able to draw on a more experienced, objective,
on a meritocracy,
on a meritocratic basis, because people are like, look, you already closed the door to that relationship. You've already told me you don't value me. You've already told me that I'm not compatible with your philosophy. And so he's got a very shrinking amount of ability to attract the highest quality talent. And you see that in all of the resignations that have plagued his administration and his inability to fill key positions, many of which are still open after extended amounts of time. Head of the Chicago Housing Authority, interim at Chicago Transit Authority at a time when CTA is just beleaguered. I mean, it is dirty. It is not safe, and the system, could certainly stand to improve its reliability and its
Did they just like end their contract with the private security?
They did, yeah, which is an interesting sort of nuance. I mean, the private security, I think, was always a stopgap for this broader issue, which is, how do we get 1 million people, right? And this is going back to problem solving and outcomes. CTA has about 1 million people that use it every single day. And proportionally, that's about a third of Chicago, right? 2.7 million people. And so you have an extremely large percentage of people that use CTA, rely on it, and some people, not all, some people truly have no other commuting options, but some people have a choice, right? Some people are like, well, maybe I'll drive, maybe I'll take an Uber or taxi, or maybe I'll ride my bike. And in a system where 1 million people are using it, we have to get the basics correct. And security with this this private security firm, I think was a step in the right direction. And it was in response to the sort of demand from the federal government that said, like, you can't light people on fire on CTA, which is incredibly egregious to think about that happening in a large scale city like ours. But ending that contract, it did come at a time where it was following on the heels of the 700-page sort of CPD multi-year reform package or reform suggestions on how Chicago Police Department could be structured more efficiently. And so I think most people are sitting there and they're like, private transit security is an okay, maybe interlude, but a long-term solution around safety is certainly necessary. And it probably involves Chicago Police Department to some capacity.
Did I see state police on CTA?
State police also, I believe, have jurisdiction where they can get on county. Right, we're in Cook County.
Yeah.
So you've got multi-layers.
Or maybe the sheriff's office. Yeah.
The sheriff's office, and what we're reaching for, I think, as a city, is this true recognition that, like, you can say murders are going down in Chicago, and those stats are great. Like, everybody wants less murders. But just because more people are getting harassed on CTA and not reporting it, that doesn't mean that our public safety solution is complete. And so we have to be able to have these complex nuances where we're acknowledging, celebrating, and learning from key statistics like decreased murders, which are obviously positive, but we can still be grossly dissatisfied with the rider experience and the overall safety on CTA, which impacts 1 million people. We have to be able to separate these two and get the politics out of it and say, what are the real solutions to make a system like CTA safer?
Yeah, that reminds me of one of my favorite CTA outcomes. It was a previous guest who's a nurse practitioner at Rush, and he and another group of individuals lobbied for the free Narcan and the availability and accessibility of Narcan via vending machines or the public libraries. And it was on his daily commute when he witnessed an individual that he's come to see over and over again on his daily commute. They might not know each other by name, but there was a morning where she was overdosing and he didn't have Narcan and no one on that train car had Narcan. And another individual is a mom whose son was a first responder as well, but he also overdosed on the CTA as well. And that's just one small nuanced aspect of public safety within the CTA.
Well, I think it gets to a broader point you're making, which is it's not about the security and policing of riders on CTA only. It's about this vision and this strategy, which I think is lacking right now, of what is our appropriate response to people both on CTA and the overlap of people that are experiencing mental health issues, homelessness issues, right? As somebody that was homeless myself, there were things I needed at that time some things I was able to access, some things I wasn't able to access. And so you've got the mental health, you've got the substance abuse, you've got the homelessness. What is clear is the least compassionate thing that we can do for somebody who needs support in any or many of those categories is to leave them on public transit and say, this is the best place for you, right? If you're overdosing on public transit, that is not the best place for you to get services or resources or help. And so part of the solution is looking beyond the immediate sort of policing perspective on CTA and saying, what should we do as a city to support this individual as well as increase safety on CTA? And it is not leave that person on CTA, especially in your story with your friend, which is that person was on CTA so much that they became a familiar face, maybe not by name, but that can't be that person's only place where they can find essentially a roof to be in outside of inclement weather, right? Why are you on CTA? Otherwise, it's because there's no better place or accessible place for you to go.
That's very tough. Where do they go? You know, do you remember what happened with like the migrants? You know, just like eventually there's tents everywhere, but then they find empty buildings around the city and they kind of just shuttle them into there.
Yeah, I you know, these again, and you know, whether it's migrants or people who are experiencing homelessness or transitory housing. I mean, you have thousands of students within Chicago public schools who are also experiencing housing instability as part of, you know, the family or the support situation they're in. And so the general idea is, you know, as people have these needs, where do they go? How accessible are they? And I actually think this is a huge opportunity for repairing some of the broken trust between the city and individuals with Chicago Police Department. That feels like it's at an all-time low. In terms of how we view each other and we're communicating with each other. But, you know, the police are sort of it's an opportunity to say, hey, you know, if you're going to go address a situation, let's think about sort of the non-law enforcement opportunities to support individuals. So it's like, instead of giving somebody a ticket for being in a tent, right, or being on a public park, for example, whatever the case may be, let's actually figure out how to take them and connect them to the resources that they themselves are saying or signaling they need, right? And so having that be sort of a triage layer, and there are non-CPD solutions to that, right? There's Health and Human Services, there's agencies, there's nonprofits, but it's like, how do we actually physically get people to the resources that we have in the city so that they can have, you know, shelter, food, a place to go to the bathroom or shower safely. These are all like real base level Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Sort of like, how do we, you know, create and sustain, you know, healthy and productive people? Yeah,
but I think how do we distribute these resources, the knowledge of these resources, to just even the citizens of Chicago? Because I think even within the CTA example, I'm sure there's plenty of civilians that, you know, if their safety's okay, but they see someone that could use some resources, like, one, do they even know what's available to them in that area? Yeah. And then two, like, it causes a certain amount of friction for them, like, do I take a moment out of my day, I'm on my way to work or wherever, to go help this person? And I'm sure there's individuals that would be willing to, but do you agree that there's like this gap in knowledge of like what is even available?
I think that gap is massive, especially in the context of 2026, right? And generally, what we're thinking about, or at least what I think about, is it is so much easier to like order food from a restaurant and have it delivered to your door. You can do that in like 15 minutes, right? That app experience, the technology experience that many of us have in our day-to-day lives, is actually incredible. It's nuts that you can order food for like $20 and have it show up at your door.
One of the last cars I bought was in my underwear on Carvana.
Yeah. Like, that's what you're able to do in sort of this like app or private market setting, right? And then you think about like, where is the city's app? Where's the app for Chicago? where we as citizens can actually do things that we need to do as it relates to conducting our lives.
To their credit, 311 was pretty helpful.
311 is really
getting recycling bins in the alleyway was actually not that bad.
And I think what you're onto is actually the key here, which is 311. There are certain things that you can do reasonably well.
Yeah.
But it really starts to break down very quickly, right? It's like, you can like report a power outage.
Yeah.
You can get your trash bin or your recycling bin. You can say that there's like flooding somewhere,
Sure.
But after a little while, and I actually was doing this the other week thinking about, where are the resources? Mm-hmm. And if you use 311 to try to find basic resources, you essentially, it's just an aggregated link platform. There's just a bunch of links.
Yeah.
And then the links go to really outdated, confusing instruction guides.
Even more friction, yeah.
Yeah. And so when you're thinking about like, I might be experiencing domestic violence and I need help. You would need like hours to use the app and navigate the internet.
Yeah.
Where is the app of the moment that sort of says, hi, what can I help you with? And then you can either type or use your voice. And there's a layer that's actually figuring out how to connect you to the city's resources behind the scenes, rather than you as a user spending all of your time
learning
how to
just
right.
Navigate,
It's impractical, right?
Yeah.
You're like, oh my gosh, well, I got to go pick up my kid from daycare. I gotta get a meal on the table, and it just never gets done. And you're like, I can definitely make it through one more day, and then it just becomes sort of this thing that is generally not usable. And so, as somebody that has built technology, as somebody that has experienced it on the consumer side, I think there is a massive opportunity to build a better technological interface between the city and actual residents, to the point where we could actually be a leader in this when you look at other municipalities and cities, rather than just sort of stuck in the average quagmire of just like non-existing technology.
Sure. Why does it feel like certain areas of the city are more or like well-resourced than others? Like let's take potholes for an example, and you put in a request in to fill certain potholes. Yeah. Why are certain areas more tree-lined or just well-resourced, well-manicured?
Yeah, I think because they actually are more resourced versus less resourced. Number one, the root of that I think is fairly well understood, which is we just have historical inequities. We have historical racial segregation. The neighborhoods themselves are one of Chicago's beauties and strengths, as we know. We have, Pilsen, we have Ukrainian Village. You can go on and on. There's Chinatown, et cetera. And these are all assets, but some of that history is overlaid with the segregation of initially ethnicities, and then more recently with mass migration of African Americans from the South and previous decades, and then the whole redlining history. You have entire communities that have been systematically deprived of resources for decades. And that shows up in a lot of ways. And I'll give you a story, and it's similar to potholes. But, when I was a teacher on the west side, I taught middle school math, got 3 years of academic growth for students that, society pretty much said, would graduate with a 6th grade reading level. Man. Some of them went on to, the best high schools in the city, college. One became a math teacher. I always ask her, I'm like, hey, did you become a math teacher because you thought I was a great math teacher? And she's like, yeah, maybe. And I was like, come on, just say yes one time. One of them became a lawyer. And so there's a possibility in education. And yet, when snow would fall, and this happens to this day, hopefully we're done with the snow in late April. You never know with Chicago weather. But what would happen is, I would come from Ukrainian Village in Wicker Park, where I lived, and it was only a couple of miles away from West Humboldt Park. But the snowfall would hit, my street would be cleaned, and then I would hop on the 66 bus. I was road CTA. I didn't have a car, and the further I got from my house, the closer I got to my school, the less likely it was that same road was plowed. And so it's not like snowplows magically focus on Lincoln Park and don't know about Garfield Park.
Right.
It's just an allocation of resources and prioritizing certain communities over others. And I think you see that in the recent flooding that's happened. Where's all the flooding? The flooding is on the west side and the south side. And it's because we haven't even attempted to modernize some of the infrastructure that's the oldest in the city, which are the drains, the sewers, our ability to move water into. I think there's like a deep tunneling sort of like cistern network. I was reading about that over the weekend, which is actually fascinating, right? You can think about people building like underground cisterns in like the early 1900s, and you're like, oh, we can build things, right? So
elevating the city.
Elevate the city, pull it off the ground. You got the bridges, all that stuff, and those are huge engineering and structural feats. And now we can't even figure out how to remove the water in a way that doesn't flood into Black and brown families' homes.
Wouldn't that be job creation? Like, why? What's the holdup?
Yeah, number one, I think we're talking about like raw foundational infrastructure. They do come with price tags, right? And I think it's really hard to dig under the earth. That's very costly as compared to building on the surface or building up. And some of these systems are exceedingly disruptive to modernize. And so lead pipes are another great example. It's a travesty that we have 400,000 homes that still have lead pipes. But in order to replace lead pipes, you have to tear up somebody's entire front yard, right? You have to tear up the sidewalk. And then you pretty much have to tear up the road if the water main is still lead. And so you're looking at you as a homeowner, you as a renter, barely being able to walk in your front door for maybe a month or two in order to replace the lead line. And then you scale that across the city, and you're like, what is the actual way to solve this? For me, I have a very different idea, because there are federal resources attached to replacing the lead lines, but they cost $15,000 per unit or per household, which is 3 times the national average of $5,000. So we're already on the back foot, having these lead line replacements cost 3 times more. The projected timeline to do this is about 75 to 100 years, which is staggering. That's
for all of it.
For all of it,
oh, wow.
Right? And so my solution, it's not permanent, but it does get around poisoning entire generations worth of people, is to create essentially maybe there's some youth, but it's certainly applicable to young adults or whoever wants to do this. You could have a water filtration installation corps, right? A group of people. There's some online training videos. Here is how you install an under the sink.
Yeah, some reverse osmosis.
It's just like literally you can get a water filter for $150.
Yeah.
So we're talking about 100 times cheaper.
Wow.
And it takes about 15 to 30 minutes to install this. And I did it at my home.
Okay.
Right? I bought it. It showed up the next day. And it required like a screwdriver and a wrench, right? And so if we want to have a very fast, effective, low-cost solution to a massively underreported public health crisis, we can actually solve that very rapidly using different thinking than this is going to take months to rip up the roads, $15,000 and 75 years.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, it creates jobs potentially for underemployed or unemployed youth that are looking to enhance their job skills. And it actively gives families and individuals clean water.
I've been, my algorithm's feeding me a lot of Mom Donnie's social media in New York, and the most recent one is him getting a tour of residences' apartments, and seeing all the things that it's not kosher for New York, like, things that aren't passing, things that aren't livable. And for you to make a social media reel and help people, install a water filter under their sink is just like it's so direct to displaying that Joe Holberg is solution oriented.
Yes.
And it's, but then there's the perception aspect of it of like, he's of the people.
Yeah. Well, and I fortunately, we actually did make, and I don't know, and we did this super early on in the campaign, and there's a reprise, and the point is that idea hasn't gone anywhere. Even if we made the video, I think it was something like October or November, but we found a individual who reached out online and said, "Hey, I just don't want to drink lead water." And we reached out to this individual a couple days later, and I was like, "Hey, can I just come install a water filter?" And the person said
awesome.
yes, and we went over and we made a social media video. And I think whether that ever catches fire or goes viral, right? We'll do those types of things for the next 10 months leading up to the election. It's like while everyone else is playing politics, I'm problem solving. That's the message, right?
Yeah,
and that's the message here with you 6 months ago when we were making a water filter installation video. It'll be the same tomorrow. The whole thing is about building a better city and solving real problems for people. That's the only focus. And I couldn't be having more fun. I love the response that we're finding from thousands of people across the city. I mean, people are just so refreshed that it's not about this infighting and division about who gets to vote for you. You get this question from the political insiders all the time. They're like, where's your base? Are you going to get white people, black people, brown people? Who's your base? And I'm like, we need to bring people together across races, across socioeconomic backgrounds, and we need to focus on where we're going, not how we're dividing up the city. And that's a very different way of looking at it than I think you're going to see in this race.
Yeah, a few things come to mind. If I forget, like the second one being like, how do we define a Chicagoan? We can come back to that. But the one being, how do you toe that line between being of the people and meeting people where they're at, and then, striking up and cultivating relationships with potentially, I don't know if gatekeeper is the right word, but like you previously shared that you had a 90-minute sit down with Bill Clinton's former campaign manager. Yeah. So individuals like that are well networked. There's importance to that, but how do you toe that line between, in my head, I'm just like maybe like a sit down with the aldermen of the city,
Yeah, aldermen are super important. We've reached out to every aldermanic office, and we've expressed our desire to meet with them, to get to know them, to build a relationship with them. You have to do both, and like all things in life, it's just a constraint. Right? It's a constraint problem. I only have a certain amount of time in my day. I only have a certain amount of resources, in this case, in the political realm, either social capital or financial capital. And, we think a lot about where we're spending our time. And all of it's important. And it's also important to realize we can't do it all. And so, we've reached out to every aldermanic office. We probably interacted with maybe, let's call it 20 to 30% of them, which is okay. They're busy, we're busy. We need to continue to build the legitimacy and the foundations of the campaign so that they can choose how to spend their time, right? Because if an alderman meets with every single candidate or every single speculative candidate, they need to spend 20 hours of their life.
You're expecting that many candidates?
Well, if you include speculative candidates, and some which will never become actual candidates, it's a constraint problem for aldermen and other key stakeholders as well. And so, it's a little bit of a lever system, but at the same time, like, we love going out and doing events where there's no charge. It's a free event. It's in a space where the community is welcome. We're thinking about faith-based organizations. We're thinking about civic or more on the philanthropic side. Where are community centers where we can go learn and also share our message and meet people. But then there are individuals that sit in positions inside of organizations where you have to be strategic and say, we do need to meet this group as part of the process, and there's history and a vetting process. And so it's a little bit of both. It's like building a business, right?
Yeah.
You have to focus on servicing your users, your customers. You have to focus on the business model and where the money is going to come in for to make the business viable. And then in many cases, you have to think about, how do I get in front of and interact with key partners, key distributors of my solution, or even investors, if that is a route you're taking, or going to the city to get a loan as a small business owner, right? You have to pick and choose to make sure that you're balancing the complexity of these systems.
Okay. So going back to the second point, you've had experience on the West Side as a teacher through AmeriCorps, teaching middle school math. What other experiences give you? Maybe we'll eventually elaborate on the homelessness and what your last year of college. What other vantage points or experiences led to the multiple vantage points that you have to empathize with all types of Chicagoans? Everyone that lives in is a resident of Chicago.
I think this is a great question. I think it's really important. This is where the background and just sort of like this brings everything together, right? I grew up in rural Michigan, a very small farming community of about 5,000 people. And as I was thinking about going to college, I went to the guidance counselor and I said, I'd like to go to the University of Michigan. And she verbatim said to me, are you sure? It's really hard. Why don't you pick an easier school?
Why did they underestimate you?
I don't know. I was just sitting there and I was like, this is terrible guidance. So I went home and I applied. I got to the end and I had to go down the street and borrow $40 from a neighbor to submit the application fee.
Wow.
That was my starting place. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to pay for the next $40,000, but I got to figure out this $40 problem right now.
Was it a lot of convincing? What did she see in you that was willing to lend the 40?
She was sort of like a third grandma.
Okay.
They had a pool, and we used to go down there in the summer.
Okay.
And so, growing up, she's like, all right, I'll take $40 is nothing to me. But it's everything to him.
Oh, my goodness.
Right? And so I get into Michigan. I'm studying economics during the Great Recession. The economy's collapsing, right? Which was wild.
Yeah.
And being in school at that time, there was a little bit of shelteredness. But at the same time, I ran out of money by the time I got to my senior year, and I couldn't afford tuition and housing.
What was the situation like? How much help did your parents give you?
Zero.
Zero help.
Zero.
Okay.
It was like, we're going to drop you off at college. Have fun. I was like, okay, let's go. Let's have fun, but also let's study and let's figure it out.
As a parent now, would you continue that mindset as well? Like, how much help would you give your kids?
There's a balance between I'm going to pay for everything and I'm going to give you nothing. I'll be in the middle, right? I have two kids. I have a 5-year-old and a 9-month-old. And so fortunately for me, I've got a little over a decade to figure it out.
Yeah.
But I want them to grow up knowing that they have an appropriate amount of support.
Yeah.
But they're also expected to develop the sense of problem solving and critical thinking,
right,
to go out into the world and not need to like look at me and my wife for every single solution, right? I think about that a lot.
To have some skin in the game.
Yeah, especially as a former educator, right? I think my kids are both cursed and blessed because my wife is a former math teacher as well.
Okay.
And so our son is 5 years old and he's already doing 40 plus
some
20.
Calculus?
Yeah. Calculus is next year. Yeah. We're mastering basic addition right now. But yeah, it's a good side question inside of this, commentary. And so, I paid for tuition because I didn't want to drop out of school. And I slept in my car and I was on food stamps in order to make it. And I wouldn't trade that experience for the world because it allowed me to figure out how to not only survive, but also figure out what was truly important so that I could go on and thrive, right?
Yeah.
And so when I graduated, Obama was a commencement speaker, which was awesome. I was crying on the football field. I was like, I'm not supposed to be here, right? There were like people all over that, had super fancy robes and gowns and hats and tassels, and then bedazzled their their caps and all that. And it was painful for me to buy like a $10 cap and gown set. I was like, where's the cheapest one?
Okay.
Right?
Okay. So what was tuition at that point on your last year, before, when you had to make that hard decision?
Let's see. I graduated in 2010. Tuition at Michigan for an in-state student, tuition was probably around $14,000, but that did not include food, housing, etc.
Yeah.
And that's where the shortfall was. It was like you transfer the federal aid money from the government to Michigan, and your tuition's paid, but there's nothing left.
Okay.
Like I spent my last $5 at one point on a Subway footlong. This was back when, $5 footlongs
They were like $6,
yeah. Yeah. $6 hadn't even caught up. You walk in,
it was $5 footlongs.
$5 footlongs. But I spent my last $5 and I was like, that's it. There's no more money in the bank account. What am I going to do next? And so you had to be really scrappy to figure it out.
I forget. Did FAFSA give, like, when you take a loan from FAFSA, do you get the money and then you give it to Michigan, or does it go straight to Michigan?
Ooh, that's a detail I don't quite remember.
And so, like, did you even have the option of using that for housing or for food?
There were some loans and some grants that you did get. But I think you see this. I think you see this in Chicago with the city colleges. I was meeting with one of the individuals there, and they were saying 30+% of their students today, not 15 years ago, Joe, at Michigan, 30% of students in Chicago at city colleges are experiencing housing insecurity, which ranges the gamut from I'm literally homeless on the street to, I'm staying with my aunt this week and my uncle, across town the next week. There's shades there. And then there's an even higher percentage of people that are experiencing food insecurity, which plagues campuses of all types, including Ivies, in the United States, because we don't provide the requisite resources for people. Again, going back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we don't really have a system that is providing for basic shelter and basic food so people can go do the things, whether it's work, live, study, etc. There's a lot of vulnerability, especially for young people, that definitely impacted me.
Yeah, I had a student that if I guess if I didn't ask, he wouldn't have told me. So I can't imagine how many students haven't told me, but it was like on a one-on-one office hours type session, and he was still struggling through a practical scenario that he needed to pass, and I had to cut him off because of how bad he was doing. And then he started breaking down, and then he started sharing that, like, since day one of class, he's been insecure with housing. And then it led into another student on a different day who shared that she's trying to make enough money to leave her abusive mom. And so she would open a coffee shop, come to class, work another job after class, all to afford a hotel room.
That's right.
It's crazy.
It is. And it is exacerbated by one of our campaign priorities, which is building housing. And what you see is when the cost of housing goes up anywhere in the United States, including Chicago, when the cost of housing increases, the rate of housing insecurity and homelessness increases as well. And so everyone's like, oh, how do we solve homelessness, right? Well, one of the best ways we can actually solve homelessness is by building enough housing for everyone. And when we have enough housing that's affordable, now everyone can afford to choose a better place for their situation. That doesn't mean that somebody that's living in a tent is magically going to go sign a lease per se, but the stress on the system reduces, and people who are on the fringes can actually find housing that's stable and affordable. And so one of our campaign priorities is to create a city that is building at least 100,000 units of housing, which is approximately how much we need. And this is over a 4-year period, so 25,000 units a year during a term, is going to start to create housing capacity to bring and depressurize prices so that people have more affordable places to live, because the single largest expense in everyone's budget is housing.
Yeah.
And so if you can impact the cost of housing, you can open up your budget where you now have better options for transportation, food, daycare if you have kids. Maybe you can invest some of that into savings or your education. But when housing starts to stress your budget, everything else sort of gets put on hold. And so housing is one of those affordability things that we talk about as a primary campaign focus.
Yeah. We last December, me and my wife bought a home in Pilsen, and I hear stories of people that are lifelong renters in Pilsen being pushed out because of the increased cost of rent, but it escalates to property taxes and mortgages as well. But there's a level of guilt that I feel after buying this home of like, am I part of that problem of like pushing people out? And you told that line between wanting something like a livelihood for you and your family, but then caring about your community as well. And then I think about another friend who has his own podcast, but he is a real estate agent and developer, and he brought on a guest who is taking advantage of the missing middle initiative and building housing all along like Ogden, like just west of the Illinois Medical District, like Douglas Park area. And it made me think of our example of the potholes and the lack of resources. And I really like the word you used in a previous interview of flywheel, and thinking about what is that flywheel that will incentivize the city to pour more resources into it, and maybe housing is that flywheel.
Yeah, I think it's two. If I were to pick two mechanisms for the flywheel, housing is certainly one of them. And you think about housing in the context of the United States. Our entire economy is largely based on our ability to build housing over the last 150 to 200 years. That is such a central backbone of our economy that we almost took it for granted, and we're seeing the negative effects in a city like Chicago, where we are on track to build less than 4,000 new units of housing for the first time ever. It's plummeted. And so we've taken away one of the largest sources of our economic engine by slowing down building housing to a trickle. And just as a comparison point, Dallas and Portland, one's red, one's blue, both of them build over 25,000 units of housing per year. And so when I say 100,000 units, I'm talking about a important but extremely achievable amount of housing compared to the 4,000 that we're about to build. We built slightly over 4,000 last year.
That's so surprising for some reason.
Is
it the cost of like resources for these developers, or like what's gatekeeping them?
Developers and when we say developers, like it brings up this negative connotation, but like there's so many underlying ingredients to building housing, right? One of the things we do that we trip over ourselves on in Chicago is we have an exceedingly long permitting process. These are based on rules that have been written down on paper. They don't actually have anything to do with materials. They don't have anything to do with desire, both from a buyer or a builder perspective. And there's enough money in markets, capital markets, to finance, whether it's getting a loan from Bank of America or going to a group that wants to invest in a larger building. All of the things are there. But some of the processes, including a lot of the permitting and the zoning, that's where we are failing as a city. And it's like a bottleneck. And you have entire communities that are starved for housing, whether it's redeveloping and renovating dilapidated housing stock, building on vacant land, building affordable housing in the traditional sort of way where government is part of that process, and even private development of just buildings that some individual or some group of people. We are lacking all of it And we need to figure out, and one of the things that I will be proposing is how to create a more streamlined, transparent permitting process so that we can actually create more housing. We have to open up that bottleneck, or we're never going to solve the problem. So that's one of them. And the second one is really being business friendly. The current administration, in no uncertain terms, hates businesses, drives them out of the city, penalizes them for being here, and makes it very difficult to start a business and to grow a business. Small businesses are another backbone ingredient to how we have built a high quality economy that is not perfect. It's not equitable, but it is still the largest and the most advanced economy in the world. And when you push out and you drive out innovation and businesses, you're actually killing jobs and opportunities for real people. And that's the great irony of being so anti-business, which is a fundamental problem, because you are directly taking away jobs and opportunities for the people that you say you're advancing when you attack business. And it's not a zero-sum game. It's actually additive. And so we need to get into a position where we are attracting, supporting, and helping people start and grow businesses. And that is small, medium, and large businesses, because these are the things that make a healthy economy and a healthy city.
So it's not just the Citadels, it's the small mom and pop shops.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. There's a tiny single site coffee shop near where I live. And I was listening to the owner, and he said, somebody said, "Hey, when are you going to put out your tables on the sidewalk?" And this guy, like, he got afraid. He was like, "Oh, I had it last year, but I haven't gotten my permit for this year, and I don't want to get in trouble and fined by the city." Single owner, tiny coffee shop, not a chain. And he was sitting there losing business, losing revenue, losing customers, because the city hadn't given him a permit to put chairs on a sidewalk in the same location that he had them the previous year. And so the solution there is just to have an automatic permit process where there is a button where you say, "Would you like this permit to auto renew next year? We will charge the card on file, the $50 or $100, whatever it is." It's so outdated. And this guy was genuinely afraid of the city penalizing him for running a small business. So yeah, we lost 1,000 Ken Griffin jobs at Citadel, millions of dollars in property tax, untold tens of millions of dollars in consumer tax from all the employees. They're gone. But it's also about that small business that has like 2 or 3 employees. And as a small business owner myself, right, I had to navigate the complexities of the city, and it was baffling. I tried to put a sign on the storefront that I had for a year, and the process was so hard that I gave up to put a sign. I'm not talking about like anchors and neon lights. I'm talking about like I printed on Vistaprint. It shows up.
Really?
And
like
I put
a decal?
Yeah, like just basic things. That process was so hard.
And so then it leaves people to just do it and ask for forgiveness after?
And then you get sort of this gray market for things that maybe aren't permitted or safe. And then you have a bunch of attrition of people that just find that it's too difficult and they just stop, right? Both of those things are bad for business. Both of those things are bad for the economy. And ultimately, that deprives us of jobs and opportunities for real hardworking people.
Yeah.
So we have to figure that out. I think there are very clear, approachable solutions to streamlining and shortening permit processes.
Right.
Another, and I don't want to dwell too much, but the ADU process, right? The accessory dwelling units that just got approved. There's now a website where you can submit your ADU application.
Okay.
When you hit submit, again, it's on the internet, which is cool. You don't have to like go somewhere. So it's like, good job, city. You put up a website. When you hit submit, and I heard this from somebody who submitted an ADU application, the screen just refreshes. There's no thank you for your submission.
Oh, so you don't even know if it went through.
You don't even know if it went through. There's no thank you for your submission or green checkbox.
Okay.
There's no email confirmation that you've submitted it with like some automated case number, permit number, whatever.
So you're left in limbo.
And there's no way to verify the status of your ADU application and permit. And you're just sitting there and you're like, these are the low-hanging fruit that create a more efficient, better government that can increase the quality of life for people and also reduce the cost of the government doing business, which means we have to tax each other less and put more money in people's pocket so that they can go do other things rather than deal with old school, legacy, broken systems.
Okay. Yeah, in addition to the permits for, let's say, the sidewalks, there was that corporate head tax, but like, was there something like similar to that on a smaller scale? Like, what other ways are small business owners having their hands tied in allowing them to do their job, their day-to-day?
I think that's one of the greatest opportunities that we have in thinking about what I would actually be doing as the mayor.
Okay.
I don't need a massive amount of social media followers. I don't need people to think that I'm like awesome or doing a good job. I just want to solve really boring problems that make people's lives better, right? And these are examples, right? When we talk about the coffee shop, when we talk about how hard it is to put up a sign, you don't get applause for shortening the length of a permit to start a business by 50%. Everyone's like, cool, good job. It's not a flashy headline, but to make the city work well, you have to focus on these things. Another example, and you can go on, whether it is restaurants in the food and beverage space, technology companies, manufacturing companies, daycare companies, service providers, barbers, et cetera, all of these can be enhanced by creating systems that function better and in a more digitized and automated way. We're saving money, we're expediting the process, and we're getting people to work faster. All of those are wins for everyone. Another industry, good example is coincidentally the daycare that I send our daughter to. We are actively waiting for DCFS to approve the permit for this location. And they're stuck in limbo. They don't know when the inspector is going to come look at the renovation they did on the building to expand their capacity. And the only way they can get information is by making calls to the city rather than looking at the status on a web page or an app, for example. And as a result, there are at least 15 families waiting to enter this that are now maybe paying more than the daycare, driving longer to a secondary daycare in the interim, which we're doing. And all of these things have negative externalities. If you want to use sort of a classical economics term, they have negative externalities on untold individuals across the city. Now, that's a personal example, but that's happening thousands and millions of times over in all of these antiquated systems and departments that haven't taken a look at how to make their processes more efficient, accountable, and transparent. And I think those types of opportunities, we could rapidly accelerate the quality of life that people enjoy in Chicago, which will make this a better, more well-functioning city, which will make it more desirable for people to move here. Because if the city works well, then people will want to be here. And when you focus on government relationships with individuals, as we move deeper into the 21st century, that is one of the competitive advantages that cities can create for themselves, is how do we design a experience for the people that live here? How can we actually improve that and make it better to live in Chicago? What tools and resources do we have to make people's lives better rather than what's happening today, which is neutral or worse, right?
Yeah, I 100% agree. And that even extends to creating an app, a city-based app for tourists.
City-based app for tourists. It's sort of, the city, it's not Chicago in particular. I think all these cities have an opportunity. We're talking about sort of like a city super app.
Yeah.
Right. And you get to the place where you've got QR codes at the airports or at Union Station. Welcome to Chicago. Download the city app for discounts. Right. And now you download this app because you just got here, and now you're connecting tourists to local businesses. Maybe there's and if you really want to get nerdy, right, maybe there's an API with hotels or Airbnbs where you can actually connect your reservation. And so if you're staying up in Ravenswood, call it an Airbnb, now when you download this app and it knows where you are staying, it can actually give you discounts to restaurants in the neighborhood in which you're staying. And technologically, these are not costly or far-fetched. They're actually things that exist today. We just haven't had the city do them. As I was driving down here, I was on Lakeshore Drive, and I went by, Soldier Field and McCormick Place. And you've got these really beautiful, convention center. Tens of thousands of people can go. Then you got Soldier Field, 30, 40, 50,000 people can go there.
Right.
And right next to it is a surface parking lot. And you're just sitting there and you're like, why is there a surface parking lot right next to some of the most entertainment-oriented areas of our city? What are the opportunities that we have to turn this into something? It could be housing. It could be hotels. It could be retail. It could be more parks, right? Bury the surface lot and create park infrastructure on top of it. But why are we dedicating some of the most beautiful, desirable space in the entire city to a flat piece of asphalt? Right? And I think those are the questions we have to ask ourselves in terms of where do we want to go? What's the vision for the future? We have to look at this critically and say, we need to design for the next several decades that are coming up, rather than just sort of accepting a surface lot that is within walking distance of the lake. It can still be parking, but what could be on top of it? And then from there, you can sort of design any number of solutions across the city to make it more vibrant, more dense, more appealing, generate more revenue, so we're actually filling the budget hole rather than creating budget deficits in City Hall. And that's where I get really excited. There's no plan B for me. It's like win.
Interesting.
Win and be the best mayor possible, right? What do people want? How can the city help them achieve it? And you go round and round, and the city's only function should be to make people's lives as high quality as possible, so that when people have greater and greater choices and flexibility in where they live, right, mobility, they choose Chicago rather than California, New York, Indiana, Missouri. We have to look at it and say, how do we win people? How do we win talent? And how do we make our city grow? And we can do that by asking questions like, why is there a parking lot next to the lake? So connecting that vision all the way down to the reality, that's a very important skill set. And quite frankly, I think that's where, when I was a teacher, I was like, I want these children to have opportunities, but what do I need to do tomorrow? And it's like, I need to get up at 5:30 in the morning, be the first person in the school, so I can print my lesson plans before the paper at the school runs out.
Damn.
Yeah. Like, that's how I'm going to get my kids to college, to vocational schools, to give them opportunities, is by setting my alarm. And you've got to be able to move up and down that stack, right? From vision to execution. You have to be able to go back and forth very quickly. You stay in any one lane or one zone for too long, and you essentially get trapped, right? If you're just on execution, you never can think about how it connects to the vision. And if you dream all day, you're never going to do it.
Right.
And so, when I quit my job to start my company, it was similar. It was like people thought I was insane when I quit my job. I was at Google. And they were like,
what did you made a platform for Google?
So when I graduated, I worked at a nonprofit, did microfinance lending to help people get access to socially conscious, affordable loans. Then I was a teacher on the West Side, got 3 years of academic growth for students, helped them go to high schools across the city, et cetera, et cetera. And then I was teaching my kids coding, 7th and 8th graders.
Is this extra or part of the curriculum?
It was extra. I was like, if you finish your math, I'll let you get on the computer and code. So they actually did their math more.
Okay.
Sort of tricked them, right?
Oh, yeah.
Tricked them into liking math. They're like, math is awesome. Just let me code, right? And it was really cool because kids are curious. They want to learn. They want to explore new things. And by giving them access to computers and helping them understand how to code, I didn't know how to code. I would learn it at 9 p.m. I'd show up the next day at 9 a.m. I'd be like, hey guys, let's change the font color, the font size. And they loved it, right?
Okay.
It was super, super energizing for them. That led to building a computer science education platform at Google, where we were building a solution to get girls and underrepresented minorities exposed to these
STEM.
concepts,
Okay.
to STEM
Yeah.
in computer science. And the message was, there are things in technology that you can do. You belong in technology. It's not just for nerdy white males sitting in the basement at 2 a.m. with Mountain Dew. You can be in these careers as well. And I was back at Michigan about a year and a half ago giving a guest lecture.
Nice.
And afterwards, a student came up to me and said, I did that program in middle school about 10 years ago. And I'm at Michigan studying computer science.
Your student?
No, just some random kid.
Okay.
Never heard of him before.
Gotcha.
And he said, I'm studying computer science because I did that program and I loved it. And I gave him a hug and he was like, don't touch me. I was like, you're going to be a great software engineer. Back to your cubicle. But it was this cool, decade full circle moment. And when I was at Google, we scaled this program. It eventually got to over 5 million students worldwide.
Okay.
I trained 250 Chicago public school teachers. They went back to their classrooms, after school programs, et cetera. And within about 3 months, over 10,000 CPS students had access to this platform, and it was free. As an example, New York public schools rolled it out for 100% of their after-school programs. It was incredible.
So, and how much was there a lot of coding involved with this, or just was it ideation for you?
In this project?
Yeah, for the Google project.
Well, there were like 20 people on this team.
Okay.
And so it was a team effort. Some of the software engineers were building the platform. There were some educators like myself that were helping to build the curricula, helping to design the program and how it was used and implemented. And so through this whole team effort, we were able to build this really successful large-scale global program.
And what led to the success of the acquisition or the onboarding or the latching onto by New York and Chicago and all,
Yeah. There was certainly this whole brand initiative, which was like, Google is building a free thing.
Okay.
Would you like it?
So the name recognition of Google.
That was one of them. But then the actual pedagogy was amazing. You could set up your entire class. We called them clubs. You could set up an entire club as a teacher, as a volunteer, a motivated parent. You could set it up in less than 5 minutes.
Okay.
It was like, click, 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 click. I now can run this for my student population.
Okay.
And so we had as much teacher or adult training material as we had actual content for the individual students. And that was one of the things that made it really successful, was we were trying to empower people who didn't know coding to teach coding. And that was a core realization early on. We wanted an 80-year-old grandma, which there were 80-year-old grandmas that set up these clubs to teach grandkids. And there were 12-year-olds that were setting it up to teach 8-year-olds. And it was as easy for that entire spectrum and span. And that led to, and that was one of the interesting things about starting a company was, I was sitting there and I was like, whoa, this technology platform is a really powerful mechanism to engage people at scale. And so when I left, and like I said, people were calling me crazy. They were like, "Stay at Google; they give you free food." And I was like, "No, I have another idea." And so I started this financial education company because, as you know, as people know, we don't do financial education or financial literacy in the United States. Not in K-12, not in higher ed.
Yeah.
We sort of like throw people into adulthood, and we're like, "You read some Shakespeare, you learned about the chambers of the heart, and you know nothing about personal finances.
Here's some credit cards.
Here's some credit cards. By the way, sign up and we'll give you a free T-shirt," right? Unfortunately, those days are sort of over. But the day I walked into college, I signed up for like 3 credit cards so I could get clothes.
Yeah.
Right? And it was like, yeah, I need a T-shirt. It happens to say Michigan, which is cool. I need a sweatshirt, right? And so it's like half my wardrobe was because I signed up for credit cards. Fortunately, I didn't abuse them. I read the terms of services, and I was like, oh my gosh, these things are dangerous.
Not many people do, though.
Not many people do.
Yeah.
And so this financial education company was really designed to help people learn about and then also work towards and achieve their financial goals.
Mm-hmm.
And we helped not only thousands of people in Chicago buy their first condo, pay off their credit card debt, use their workplace transit benefit so they could get a tax break instead of paying out of pocket, little things that add up, including big things like buying a home. But we scaled it nationally, and we were the top rated financial education platform in the United States for 3 years in a row. Oh. And tens of thousands of people were using this platform to learn about the thing that we just skipped over in our education system.
Yeah.
So that was a really incredible experience. I was downtown. I was at 1871, which is Chicago's technology incubator.
Still a one-man show at that point?
It was for me.
Okay.
I started that business in 2015.
Yeah.
I got into 1871 in 2016, and I was doing everything. I was doing sales, marketing, servicing, operations, etc. And somebody said to me like, "Hey, this is going really well. You should raise VC." And I was like, "What's VC?"
Yeah.
And they were like, "Venture capital." And I was like, "Wait, people will invest money in my company to help me grow this beyond myself?"
Right.
I was like, "Absolutely." And so I ran around, met a bunch of angel investors, venture capitalists. They invested $1 million in the business, which allowed me to hire people.
Okay.
And then from there, we were able to build out a really unique and new type of financial education workplace benefit. And the key there for our business model was companies were paying for access to this platform.
Yeah.
And as a result, it was free and unbiased and confidential to employees. So as an employee, you were like, "Wait, I don't have to pay you?" No, you don't. Wait,
yeah.
You're not going to try to sell me a financial product or services? No. We're literally just here to help you. And by the way, we're going to help you track and reach your financial goals, whatever they may be.
Yeah.
And that was sort of the business model innovation. We scaled that, like I said, across the country. And then, Victor, I'm not kidding. I was sitting on LinkedIn, and the little blue light went off, and somebody messaged me, and they were like, "We want to buy your company." And I was like, "This is a scam for sure." And I got to know them. They were legitimate. They're a wealth management firm. They were very interested in understanding how to serve people that didn't have enough money from an asset management perspective, which is like 97% of America, right? Mm-hmm. They were like, "We work with people that have $1 million or more, but we want to work with people that have less than $1 million." And I was like, "That's us." And so they acquired the company in 2023. It was a great cultural fit, great alignment. And we got an opportunity to continue to grow that platform. And so, it worked out personally for me in the sense that in 15 years, I went from like sleeping in my car on food stamps to being in a position where I could make the choice to leave my job and choose to serve people by running for mayor. And so the amount of privilege that I feel by being able to choose to serve people is pretty enormous. And I think that's the type of person you want leading the city, is somebody that's putting people over politics, which is exactly where this campaign comes in.
Yeah, that's very powerful. What would you attribute the access to a room of VCs? Would you attribute that to being a part of 1871?
I think that was a network of people that I absolutely did not have access to.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of people at the very beginning, they were like, so did you do a family and friend round? And I was like, no, I have no family and friends that can invest like more than $1,000.
Yeah.
Like 1,000 would have been stretching it
Sure.
for most of the network of people that I knew at that point. And so it was a grind. It actually took me 8 months to raise $1 million. And for other individuals that might have been in that space, or maybe they're starting a second company, a lot of the venture capital space is built around networks and signaling through your networks. Oh, I know this successful entrepreneur, and if the successful entrepreneur likes this other entrepreneur, they can help bridge that connection into venture capital. And that's not a Chicago thing. That's literally how the entire industry is set up. And so when I started, I had to like research venture capital firms on the internet, write a list down, find out who worked at those firms, and then I had to go to LinkedIn, and sometimes it was like 2 or 3 or 4 connections to find that individual. And the irony was, at 1871, the venture capital firms, a lot of them strategically and by design, were on the 13th floor, and 1871 was on the 12th floor. And there were stairs that connected you. And so you could like literally walk up, but you couldn't just walk up and walk into the venture capital office and be like, knock, knock, I'm ready to pitch you. You had to use the social network to get the meeting.
Yeah.
And then you could walk up the stairs and walk in the office and pitch them. And there are pros and cons. I'm not saying it's a perfect system. There are pros and cons to opening a restaurant, as previously discussed here. It just, for me, it was exceedingly difficult to access that venture capital from the starting line that I was at. And look, I mean, like we're on camera, and this will be on YouTube. Like, you think about venture capital statistics in the United States, like I am a white male that holds a college degree. And so from a starting line perspective, I'm already halfway to being able to raise venture capital. You look at women, minorities, people that don't necessarily live in urban environments, which is where a lot of VC is concentrated, they're way further back. Their starting line is yards, miles, decades, however you want to sort of metaphorically think about it. I think something like 2 to 3% of all venture capital goes to women in the United States, which is obscene. They're 47% underrepresented as a group. And then you layer on other dimensions like, you know, maybe I'm an African-American woman, or even if I'm an African-American or a Latino man, like these structural distances from the concentration in that social network sense make it really hard for a lot of people to even access that or contemplate it in that sense. And a lot of times they're turning to more limited capital pools like friends and family, even though that can be difficult or unstable. And so this is, again, going back to how do we encourage and how do we support businesses to start? How do we support them through their growth journey? We want companies to grow. We want them to have more and more employment opportunities, and thinking about ways to make this a healthier business ecosystem is, among others, one of our campaign priorities.
Okay. What was going on through your head when the prospect of being acquired happened?
I'll tell you, it was nerve-wracking, right? Because essentially it's like the largest fruit of your life is being dangled above your head. And you have to go through a process called due diligence, which is essentially sharing all of the company information with the potential acquirer. You know, hey, here's our balance sheet. Here is our revenue from the last, X number of years. Here's our audits. And fortunately, we were hyper organized as a financial technology company. We were exceedingly organized and disciplined as it related to running the actual business, which, side note, I think you actually need somebody that understands the power of financial discipline to run City Hall and the budget. And so balancing our budget, managing our resources, making sure that we were growing in a responsible way. These are all things that translate as a skill set to being the mayor. But as it related to getting acquired, I mean, that's a multi-month process. Mm-hmm. And the fruit sometimes felt like it was just moving one step further away. Ooh. Every time, right? It was like, all right, we're there. And they're like, wait, we have one more question. You answer the question. The next day, oh, we have two more questions. And it got so stressful. Not because of them. They were great partners. They were amazing communicators. It got so stressful for me as I started to see what was going to happen financially for our employees, myself, and our investors. I got so close to that finish line that I was sleeping like 2 or 3 hours a night for weeks on end. I mean, it was like more sleep deprivation than being like a new parent, right? And fortunately, I've experienced both of them, and sleep returns. And then when the deal happened and it closed, my body broke out in shingles because I was so stressed.
Oh, wow.
It was like the single largest stressful event in my life, besides like my parents getting divorced, not to get on like the Freudian couch or anything. But like in terms of the magnitude of the impact on my life, those were like enormous activities, events. And I went to the doctor, and the doctor was like, hey, have you been on any disproportional amount of stress?
Wow.
And I was like, yes, I just sold my company. It worked out well. And she goes, that's why you have shingles.
That's
wild.
wild.
That was my body's response to how stressful it was. And fortunately, it went away within like a week or so.
Yeah.
No long-term effect or damage or anything. But that just shows you the intensity of it. It was an amazing process.
Was there any part of you that was like actually wanted to hold on to it instead of being acquired?
Oh yeah. Every founder, every leader, every startup entrepreneur, you birth this thing. You come up with this idea in your head. You spend months thinking about whether or not it's worth it. You spend years trying to bring it to life. Right? You're trying to build something that previously didn't exist. Mm-hmm. And you grow really attached to it, right? And this thing was the thing that gave me a lot of purpose. It gave me a lot of ability to be a servant and impact other people's lives. Like we had people cry because they felt so relieved to get an answer to a financial question that they just didn't know how to answer. We had financial coaches on our platform. Our financial coaches, they would be some of the first people to know that a couple was pregnant because of the financial implications of getting pregnant in the United States. We haven't told our family, but we wanted to talk to you first to understand how we're going to navigate this financially. Really meaningful things across thousands and thousands of people's lives. And so to sell it and know that it was going to go somewhere else, you think about whether or not you should do it.
How many people will lose access to this?
No one lost access.
No one lost access.
Yeah.
So, because when it gets acquired, doesn't it just get kind of gate kept behind this wealth management company?
No, that was part of the strategy was actually to grow the presence, and so that's where I talk about the cultural and sort of the business alignment that we achieved.
So they were just kind of carrying the torch then.
Yeah, and they rebranded it, and that's totally fine. And I think there's things that there's all these trade-offs, but in aggregate, having it land at a company who valued financial education and valued helping people advance and work towards their goals, that's what I was looking for in an acquirer. And from that perspective, to this day, it is a great place for that to live on. And I'm really excited that it's the second technology platform that I've sort of been able to walk away from, but know that it still exists and is still creating impact in the world.
How can people find it right now?
It's Mariner Finance.
So it's like an app?
Oh, yeah. It's a website.
It's a website.
MarinerFinancialWellness.com.
Okay.
Anyone can go to it. It's offered as a workplace benefit as it was before.
Okay.
And so, the goal was to have more companies offer it as a a solution to their employees.
But if your company doesn't work with them, can a direct to consumer trade?
I don't believe there's a direct.
That's what I mean. Like, was it before? Was it an app before?
It was not an app.
It was
before.
a website before.
It was always a workplace benefit.
Oh, it was always a workplace.
And that
benefit.
was sort of that was the market position, right?
Okay,
if you wanted a consumer facing app, you could go to mint.com.
You mentioned that in the book as well.
Bankrate.
Yeah.
Yes, and thank you for having the book. The backstory on the book, of course, I wrote that while I was running the business. The company at the time was called Holberg Financial, my last name. And then we changed the name to Spring, which was way better, by the way. And, when I started selling this into the workplace, I was like 25, 26.
Wow.
And I was going in and I was talking to like heads of HR, chief financial officers. And it wasn't just about age, but these people had seen everything, right, pitched to them in terms of workplace benefits. And I roll in and I'm like, hi, I'm Joe. Will you pay us? Number one. And number two, will you let us help all of your employees with some of the most important decisions they're going to make in their lives?
Who are you?
Who are you? And after realizing sort of the insanity of a 25-year-old pitching somebody 50, 55, 60, top of their game, they've seen everything. Oh, you should have a ping pong table because it makes your employees happy, and happy workers love you more, right? That's sort of the benefits marketplace in a nutshell. And there, 401ks, healthcare, obviously core benefits have been around for decades. But, people are getting pitched like, cold brew on tap, cappuccino machines as a way to like increase retention,
free food,
et cetera. All these things individually, a lot of them are relatively low cost, but from a benefit standpoint, it's death by 1,000 cuts, right? If you sign up for everything, your budget as a benefits leader is going to go underwater pretty quick. And so ours was affordable, but they were asking themselves an age-old question, which is, why should I choose this versus something else?
Yeah.
Not necessarily should I choose this at all, because people were like, oh yeah, I can see why financial health and financial education is helpful to my employees, right? And so I was sitting there and I was like, I really need them to understand how much expertise I've developed in the personal finance space. And I was like, it'd be pretty cool to be able to walk into a meeting with a book and leave it behind. And by the way, if I write this book, it will actually have the content that people need to work towards and reach their financial goals. And so I wrote the book up at a coffee shop in Wicker Park. It was called Scone City. It was on Division Avenue in Milwaukee. And I would go in right when they opened. And for about 6 months, from 6:30 in the morning to 8:30 in the morning, I would sit there Monday through Friday and I would just write.
Oh, wow.
And whatever happened in that period, that was the day's work for the book. And then when my alarm went off, I went back to, my apartment, I showered, and then I ran the business for the rest of the day.
Oh, wow.
And after 6 months, I ran into a publisher at 1871 because of their mentor network. I was able to sort of accidentally find a publisher. And the first question he asked me is like, so how much of the book do you have written? And I was like, 100%. I've written it. It's in Google Docs, and I'm breaking Google Docs. It would like take 2 minutes to load because it was so long that the cloud was having a hard time letting me get to the book. And so we published this book, and I would take it to sales meetings. And I mean, it was like night and day. People were like, whoa, you're an author. We should actually listen to your pitch about this benefit. And at the end of the day, it was a huge accelerant to our ability to grow, was having a physical book, which now sits in front of us here.
Yeah, that's beautiful. 6 months is fast.
Yeah. It's it turned out. I think it turned out pretty well.
I liked the structure of the book of it feels like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, of like healing what needs to be healed first, as far as like debt, and being aware of like where is the slowly coming from and how to patch all the holes, and then getting into the savings part and things like that. So do you have that similar perspective on top of the city budget, I'm sure?
Yeah, in the book in particular, I think there's a bathtub metaphor. And a bathtub metaphor is really nice, right? Because you have a faucet.
Yeah.
That's your revenue, whether it's how much income you make as an individual, how much revenue you're making as a company, or how much revenue you have coming in as a city, right? It's a finite faucet. It might be fast at times, it might be slow, et cetera. But as the tub fills up with water, right, the goal is to take a bath.
Yeah.
In this silly metaphor, but actually a good one. And you're sitting there and you're like, if the drain is open and the expenses are draining out faster than the faucet is putting water in, your overall amount of resources are coming out of the tub, right? And so that metaphor is super helpful for helping people understand the rate at which they're spending money. And in our society, on the individual level, on the personal finance side, it's never been easier to spend money. You can spend money in less than 5 seconds with less than 1 or 2 clicks on your phone. It's almost magic that you can buy millions of goods, have them show up at your doorstep, and all that is making the drain of your bathtub really big. Right? And that's where a lot of people get into trouble. And both you see that at the city level, right? Brandon Johnson proposed $1 billion budget deficit. I'm actually very afraid of this next budget that he's going to propose. I think this is his swan song. I think he's going to unleash just this massive budget where we're probably going to try to go back and be like, $1 billion wasn't as bad compared to what he's going to propose. It's a speculation, just sort of the mentality of coming to the end of his term. I think he's going to go pretty hard on debt, pretty hard on in the red. But this is also where, from a human perspective, it's really easy to spend money. The average American has $8,000 in credit card debt, which if you sit there and you think about that in terms of the entire society, right? We've got, north of 300 million people. Not all of them are credit card holders or adults. But in aggregate, we have over $1 trillion in outstanding credit card debt across people in the United States. And at roughly 20% annual interest, the credit card industry makes about $200 billion a year in revenue. That is a staggering amount of revenue when people have debt that they can barely afford to pay the minimum payment on. And so you can see the transversal from personal to business to city, where it's about managing your resources, making sure the rate of water coming into the tub is greater than the amount going out. And while it may be a simple metaphor, sometimes the simplicity is the thing that highlights an incredibly important, complex thing like a budget.
That's got to be scary, though. Like for the incoming mayor to take on, for every cycle, it's just like to take on this mess that is left on their table. And whether it's a mess from the previous administration, of which there's certainly dimensions, or whether it's sort of the mess of the history beyond just the current administration. I mean, and this is where, I think a lot of people in Chicago understand we are depriving ourselves of $1 to maybe $2 or $3 billion a year. I don't have the exact number, but we could look it up. At least $1 billion in annual revenue from the parking meter deal, right? And now that I think about it, it was sold for $1.1 billion in 2008 as Daley was, sort of walking out of office, and it's largely seen as probably one of the worst deals in Chicago history by undervaluing the asset. And we'd check them. We'd have to check. Mayor Johnson had a chance to buy it back.
Sort of.
Or at least bid on it.
I don't think we can't penalize him on that front. Like Rahm renegotiated it in 2013, and there were some things that actually increased the difficulty of having flexibility from the city perspective. They put some more restrictive covenants in it, which gave us less optionality. So Rahm, Daley sold it, which was ultimately where we got screwed. Rahm's agreement, I think, got tighter and harder to negotiate, and then Lori, I think every mayor sort of thinks about it, the point is, the Chicago Parking Meter Company, LLC, these sovereign wealth owners from like Europe and the Middle East, there's like these entities are well documented on like Wikipedia in terms of who owns it. They've taken the approach of, how do we write this legal agreement so Chicago can never have any choices related to the deal and never take it back. That's the framework around which this agreement is built. And so you can't really blame Rahm, Lightfoot, or Johnson, or me next. So please forgive me in advance, Chicago. The city's hamstrung on this thing. And I mean, like, legal resources. We're talking the city's best and brightest lawyers have been put on this deal to try to find wiggle room. And the answer is pretty much like, it's a Gordian knot that no one can really get out of. And so, unfortunately, that's something that has this long history of destabilizing our budgets and depriving us of a greater faucet flow rate where we actually have more resources. And I think now that I'm recalling, I think it's $200 million in revenue a year, but that's significant in terms of the overall $6 billion corporate fund. $200 million that could go repair potholes on the south and the west side, that could invest in building smaller schools that are more appropriate for communities rather than having them, stay in these giant buildings that have like 90 students or 50 students. We'd have tons more choices if we were able to capture that revenue that's now gone.
I mean, some of the residents of Chicago don't really feel inclined to pay these parking meters, because especially knowing that it doesn't go back to Chicago.
There's this guy, Gene Sharp. He wrote a series of books on the politics of nonviolent action, right? And it was coming on the heels of sort of, MLK Jr. and the civil rights, and he sort of turned it into an actual academic field. And when you think about individuals not paying something, they're essentially engaging in economic protest.
Yeah, Rachel Cohen comes to mind.
Yeah.
She filed her taxes, but is tucking away her what she owes to the IRS into a high-yield savings account.
Yeah, and some of those things are going to be legally permissible, some of them not so much. But I think on the surface, in terms of thinking about this economic sort of protest or economic warfare, Montgomery bus boycotts are a great example. It's like, well, we're just going to choose not to ride the bus. It's going to suck, but we're going to exercise within the choice set that we have. And I think there's something really interesting there as it relates to the to the parking meters, which is they're saying you have to pay us. And the contract with using a vehicle and parking it is, well, if I don't pay it, I'm taking the risk of getting a ticket. Everyone gets to make that choice. That's why the tickets exist. And so if more and more people choose to opt for tickets, then guess who doesn't get the revenue? This magical LLC that's owned by,
Right, so that's a key distinction.
Yeah, there's
the tickets go to the city.
The ticket revenue goes to the city.
Interesting.
And so the thing about that is, and I think about this often, I'm just sitting there and I'm like, what if everybody stopped paying? Number one, you can't find enough parking enforcement. You can't employ enough parking enforcement people to give everyone tickets. And so there's sort of like this herd immunity where if everyone stopped paying, then not everyone would get tickets. Some people would definitely get tickets. But in aggregate, the revenue would go from going into the coffers of the company that owns the parking meters to getting some tickets that go to Chicago. And that's a form of economic
That's so interesting.
protest. And
with the cost of those tickets would probably be less than you paying for the meter every time.
Well, let's say, I think simplistically, right? If a ticket is $60 and every time you park somewhere it's $10, you're taking the gamble that you only get one ticket every 10 parking sessions.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you think that you're going to get one ticket every 11, 12, umpteenth time, it's actually a better deal
to get the ticket.
Because now you're paying less than your total parking fees.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So not that you heard it here first, but there's a long history of economic protests that I think could bring this company back to the negotiating table.
Yeah.
And from a mayor's position, I think what you're saying is like, I'm never going to ask you to publicly admit it, but you guys got a pretty sweet deal where you screwed the city over. Like everybody knows it. It's like this public secret. We're not going to ask you for 100% of the revenue back for the 70 more years that this lease holds for, which is asinine, to be frank. Like signing an 85-year lease on the parking meters is crazy, right? Entire populations of people will be born, live, and die during this contract. Like not everyone's going to make it to 85. I hope I do. I'm certainly rooting for it. But you're saying like share the revenue with the city, because if you share the revenue with the city, we can go do things that will create a stronger city that increases the demand for parking in the long run. And so it's a win-win, right? You got to phrase it as a win-win. It's simple to say in a podcast. It's exceedingly hard to negotiate because they're not going to necessarily wake up one day and be like, you know what? Out of our altruistic hearts, let's forfeit some of the value of this deal and this company, if you want to call it. We're not just going to voluntarily give it back. There's got to be some pain that they experience, or some creative upside where it's like, we're going to trade this block of meters and we're going to give you a piece of vacant land over here, right? There's either got to be some type of pain or some type of promise. I'm not saying like trading parking meters for vacant land is a good idea. I'm just saying that that's the nature of the relationship, to engage in some renegotiation in order to affect a larger share of the revenue or the proceeds from clearly the worst deal in Chicago history.
What are some, so let's imagine the debates. What are some like talking points or themes or topics that you feel like will be brought up? I know we touched a lot about public safety, the budget, housing. Do you think there are any topics that I missed today that will be brought up during those debates?
Yeah, I think debates, there will be other topics, right? And my platform is really centered around affordability through growth.
Okay.
Right? Cities are either shrinking in terms of population and vitality and businesses, which Chicago is currently, or they are growing and there's more jobs, more opportunities, and more affordability. The thesis of my campaign is about affordability through growth. And how do we actually build housing? Because building housing is growing, and when you grow housing supplies, you make it more affordable. How do we balance the city's budget so we can give people in Chicago a break on the taxes so they don't have to pay as much? If we're efficient with our government's resources, if we are growing, then the proportional share of taxes per individual will go down. So there's fiscal management, there's housing increase, housing supply increase, and then there's this idea, which has been corrupted by the current administration, that businesses are bad. We have to turn that into businesses are actually part of the way that we solve a lot of our problems. And all of those things relate to helping the city start to grow again. We had 3.6 million people in the 70s. We have 2.7 million now. We need to get back into a growth trajectory. And when we have more people, everybody pays less in taxes. When we have more people, we have more housing. And when we have more people, life is more affordable. But when you're shrinking, the irony is that life becomes more expensive. So that's a lot of the debate. I think a lot of conversations will be had around education as well. CPS is struggling mightily, and they're struggling to do what I would consider something fundamental, high impact, and also something basic, which is making sure students get to and stay in school. High schools across Chicago have roughly a 46% chronic absenteeism rate, meaning about half of kids are treating school like optional. Across the entire system, including K-8, 30% of students are chronically absent. And when you are not in school, you can't learn. And when you are not learning, you are not getting ready for the jobs and the opportunities that are mere years ahead. And so achievement in this city starts with attendance. The nuance is we are going to a fully elected school board for the first time in about 30 to 40 years.
Instead of an appointed board.
Instead of an appointed board by the mayor, largely by the mayor. They will all be elected in November before the mayoral election in February of 2027. However, I still think from a history perspective, we will expect mayoral candidates to have positions on education. It will just be slightly nuanced, which is what is the position of the mayoral candidates in working with a fully elected Chicago Public School Board, and being able to articulate that it is more important now than ever to have a strong and productive relationship between the city and Chicago Public Schools in an age where the workforce is rapidly shifting from industry to industry. It's more critical now than ever for the city to be a good partner of Chicago Public Schools so that we can equip students of the next generation to actually learn and succeed and thrive and be able to go on into the workforce of which the city relies and being productive and skilled.
What do you think is attributing or leading to the high absenteeism?
I think there's a number of factors. You've got family resources, number one. What I experienced when I was teaching was parents and caregivers, they care so much about their kids' education. That is a starting point that we have to all agree on. Like, there's this narrative in Chicago, oh, those parents don't care about education. Oh, they don't value, right? Other. It's just fundamentally not true. People across the city, high, middle, and low income, they all care desperately about educational opportunities for their kids. But what they're doing is very different than a higher, if we're talking us and them, right? Like people in Lincoln Park, like I walk my son to school because I don't start my workday until 8:30, 9 o'clock after. The parent or the caregiver who cares as much as me about education that might not have as much job stability or resources, they're sitting there going and working at a coffee shop, opening up Starbucks at 5 a.m. So they're already 3 hours into their workday by the time they need their elementary student or their middle or high school student to wake up, brush their teeth, eat food, and go to school. And so it's not that we don't value education equally across the city. I believe we do. It's that we have a system where it is very difficult for many families and caregivers to bring their children. Again, these are minors, right? These are kids. Right? Kids don't just magically wake up and they're like, I'm looking at my clock and I got 25 minutes to eat, brush my teeth, dress, walk out the door by myself. You and I couldn't do that as like 10-year-olds, right? And so because we have people that are working so hard to put food on the table, both before school, during school, after school, with 2-3 jobs, it's hard for parents to drop them off at school on time. It's hard for parents to pick them up and get them home safely. And I saw that, for years on end in West Humboldt Park, and my wife was actually a principal in the Austin neighborhood, and so even after I had left the classroom, I was still, you know, in and around schools in the West Side, and you know, those drop off and the pickup times are often the hardest ones for families to navigate, and so, you know, we've got to come up with solutions to help students getting to school. And then we have to support them in those critical hours after school. And a good example of how we have scaled infrastructure that could be a good after-school space are the public libraries, right? The public libraries, they have educational resources. They already have staff. They have computers. You know, there are modifications you'd have to make. You'd have to make some investments in making sure public libraries are places where larger numbers of students could go to do homework, to even just like do basic socialization. It's like, get out your math homework and you probably get distracted. Maybe you're doing a little bit of homework, but mostly you're just trying to like connect with your peers in a safe and predictable environment. And they're scattered throughout the city. And so there's this notion that perhaps public schools and the library system could conjoin in a strategic way to support students in those aftercare hours when parents are still working. But we have to drill it down into the root, right? So for me, I think, you know, making sure there's strong communication emanating from the schools to make sure you're calling parents and caregivers and extended relatives to make sure that you're supporting them and getting to school.
So not every school has like school buses. Are these kids left to like CTA transportation?
Yeah, I mean, Chicago doesn't really have buses.
That's interesting.
And you know, there's buses for special needs students and other situations, but by and large, our buses are CTA buses.
So that's a suburban thing then, to have these yellow school buses pick you up at a bus stop
and rural. Yeah, I mean, I spent 90 minutes on the school bus to and from school because we lived in a farming community.
Yeah.
It was like, you know, probably drove 20 miles on a bus by the time I got to school, by the time you get all the kids and stuff. But in Chicago, you know, students are able to get free CTA or reduced fare passes.
Yeah.
And so, the infrastructure is there from a city perspective with libraries and CTA to get kids to and from school. But again, you're asking 12, 14, 16-year-olds to essentially take on a level of independence and responsibility that as a society, by treating them as minors, sub 18, we've essentially said you are not equipped to be an adult at this point. And I think it's really fair to take the burden off of students and say you should care so much about your education that you figure out how to get yourself to school. I mean, given the choice, like, I loved school growing up, but I would have loved to sleep in more. But I knew that wasn't a possibility for me because my ride was going to leave, because I would, you know, not be able to keep up on homework. You know, fortunately for me, my mom was, you know, she worked in the school system. She was a teacher aide. And so a lot of times she's like, I got to get to work, so get in the car.
Yeah.
Right? And so, you know, that not everyone has somebody that works in a school system that can like transport them.
I appreciate the insight that you shared about, you know, there's a baseline level of desire for quality education from all levels of income. I think we can all agree to that, and it's...
Well, you'd be surprised. There are a lot of people that do not agree.
Oh, really?
That's
not a thing?
No. I mean, there's... people don't post it on Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok. They don't say, I believe that some parents don't care about education as much as I do. But that is absolutely a massive undercurrent.
You see it in like the likes or the comments, you know. And the analogy or the example that I'm thinking of right now is like those teen takeovers, and I'm sure there's some overlap with the absenteeism in school per se, with the likelihood of being part of these situations where they feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves in these teen takeovers, and they could just be a teen.
Kids make bad decisions.
Yeah,
that's why we treat them like kids.
But you see it in those comments and those likes.
In those comments, and it fuels this narrative
of like, where are their parents? Let's punish their parents.
Punish the parents. Punish the parents. It's like, guys, the route to reducing teen takeovers is to increase the attendance at school.
Mm-hmm.
They go hand in hand. Now, I know this because when I was an educator, if my students were at home, they weren't just whipping out their homework or sort of independently guiding themselves through the next day's lesson. They were sitting around on their phones, texting their friends like any of us would do, right? And the thing about chronic absenteeism, when you have so many children out of school, you have to realize that the teen takeovers, even if they have hundreds of individuals, 90+% of students that have missed school are not participating in
Oh,
teen.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, let's do the math. You have about 330,000 CPS students. If we have 30% chronic absenteeism, that means 90,000 students are not going to school regularly. A teen takeover might have 100.
Hundreds.
Yeah. So we're talking 95, 97, maybe even 98% of students who are not going to school regularly are not participating in teen takeovers. Teen takeovers are a very tiny fraction of the students who are not in school, yet they are related.
Yeah.
Because when you are at home, of the 90,000 that are home, they will be on their phones, chatting on TikTok, Instagram, doing kid things, right? But then some of that bleeds into and then gets into a planned teen takeover where some of them are now getting a choice that likely wouldn't have been there if all the kids were busy, occupied in school.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the greatest levers that we have to reaching most of our outcomes. We have a more educated workforce when people go to school. We have less teen takeovers if people go to school. And then we have a workforce that is ready to take on higher quality, higher paid jobs, which raises the overall income in not only their lives, their community lives, but the city life. And so getting kids to school is one of the most important things CPS can focus on, and the mayor can support CPS in focusing on. It should be fundamentally unacceptable to have anything less than 95% daily average attendance at every single school and across the entire system. If it's below 95%, a lot of the research starts to show that that's when you just have kids that are just never catching up academically. That's when you have more social problems, more issues, et cetera, et cetera. We have to get kids to school, which is why I say achievement starts with attendance. I say that all the time because if you can't nail that as a city, we're never going to figure out the harder issues.
Yeah.
What to teach them, what job training or preparedness or how to get kids into college. Everything becomes exponentially more difficult if kids aren't going to school. So that's problem number one in education. How do we raise the attendance rate?
Okay.
Yeah. Time check.
Yeah.
I love talking. This is great.
We're approaching 1 hour 55.
Okay. Maybe last
One last question is like I you don't hear too often the relationship between like the fire department or police department and the mayor. We unfortunately had 2 police shootings recently up in the north side by Swedish, at Swedish, and but like how important is it to you to have like an open-ended like relationship with the fire department and police department?
Yeah, for sure. It's a great question. First and foremost, all the thoughts and sympathies and just like support that we can muster for the police officer that was shot. I think it was it Jonathan Bartholomew?
Yeah.
I got married less than a mile away from Swedish, right? We were just doing an event up there within a stone's throw of the hospital. And not to comment on the nature of that event itself, obviously it's a tragedy, but if we go back to the relationship and the root of the question that you're asking, it's this is when you have a candidate and when you have a mayor that is truly focused on problem solving, one of the most impactful ways to solve problems well is to communicate with and be part of these different groups rather than building silos and walls. And we don't have to go through the whole history of mayoral relationships with fire and police. There's obviously tension there, and there's exceeding amounts. Like when your house catches on fire, right? The firemen show up and they try to put it out. It's not really the contentious relationship that we're talking about. Chicago Police Department has and the people of Chicago, we're probably at what I view as maybe one of the all-time lows in terms of the trust that we have in each other. It's a two-way street. Police don't feel like they're supported by the current mayor, and people don't feel like they're supported by police. And that is an erosion of trust, and it's fueled by the brick wall and the silo of the current administration. And there's enough in the public atmosphere, like, Brandon Johnson, made a strong appointment in hiring Larry Snelling. The city largely views that as positive, and he should get the credit for a strong hire. But other than that, it is an extremely divisive relationship with the current administration in the way that he communicates about police and the way that he communicates to police. And what's happening is we're in a vicious cycle right now where, because the mayor is not trying to build a positive relationship with police, they are getting demoralized. And when police officers are demoralized, they quit, right? And so CPD is having staffing issues where they're having a difficult time filling their ranks because people don't want to be police. And if you ask a police officer, why are you doing this job? The vast majority of them say, because I want to protect and serve my community. Now, they have a long history of some individuals abusing that power, Laquan McDonald, et cetera, very topical scars that the city have, some of which have not healed. But if you're in this vicious cycle of less and less police, which creates more and more strain on their ability to protect and serve, more and more of them exit the profession. And then that further erodes trust in communities. And so what we need to do is we actually need to start building a better relationship between police and between people in Chicago. And a simple idea, going back to problem solving. I'm not looking to do massive overhauls or change fundamentally the way that relationship works. I want to do simple things. And a simple thing is when police officers are driving around Chicago, most of the time they have their windows up. And they're like semi-tinted windows, but they're anonymous. We don't know who our police officers are. Roll the window down, get out, walk around, and interact with people in a non-law enforcement capacity. You're not actively giving somebody a ticket. You're not actively arresting somebody.
You love those heartwarming videos of playing basketball or whatever.
Like playing basketball. Yeah. And honestly, you probably couldn't get a middle school kid to say, I'm pumped about the police officer being at dismissal. But police officers being at dismissal for schools increases the amount of safety, lowers the number of incidents, and it breeds a passive observation and a positive image of a police officer being around students in a school. They're not there to, arrest somebody for eating Flamin' Chips or hot Cheetos or whatever. They're just there to make sure kids can exit the building in a safe way. And through years and years of seeing...
This is generational, unwinding generational trauma.
If we can just have the interface
just
layer...
a presence,
and a presence and a neutral or a positive presence, that's this type of thing that starts to repair trust.
Yeah.
And I don't know, is that...
Yeah, no,
Is that
we can.
my phone or your phone? I think that's the
We can call it
digital
time.
gods.
Yeah,
calling
no
it
worries,
time.
Joe Holberg. It was truly a pleasure. Thank you for coming on. This doesn't have to be the last time. You're welcome back anytime. I appreciate the ideas and the insight, and we're looking forward to your journey. Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great things. And if someone's looking for you, how can they find you?
joe4chicago.com. Doesn't matter if it's a 4 or you spell it. It'll get you to
really?
say,
Okay,
I got both domains. I was like, somebody's going to type in 4, the number 4. But joeforchicago.com. Volunteer, obviously contribute. Unfortunately, we live in the age where money in politics is a real thing. And then just be aware and be involved, right? Scope out the other candidates. If you like me the most, that's awesome, but be an educated voter regardless. 10 months until the election. I think it's 298 or 299 days. So we got a little bit of time, but it is coming up. So thank you again for having me on your show.
Okay, everyone, thanks again for tuning in. Give Joe a follow on Instagram. Are you on TikTok too?
TikTok, Instagram, X,
all
Blue
of it.
Sky.
LinkedIn, yeah.
It's all Joe for Chicago.
Okay, all right, thanks everyone. We'll catch you in the next episode. Bye.
Thanks, Victor. Awesome.